Good evening and welcome to For the Record. The 2017-2018 national budget was announced in Parliament last Thursday and hailed by many for its increased social benefits, popular tax relief and salary increases. But critics and the opposition have attacked it as unrealistic and a vote-buying exercise. Joining me tonight to discuss, defend and explain the budget that he led, put together and delivered, the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stanley.
So, great budget. Many people have said they liked it. There was so much good stuff in there that the opposition is arguing that it was put together to get people to vote for you in the next elections. Was this an elections budget?
It would be nice if the opposition actually commented on the substance of the budget itself as opposed to playing cheap politics. Many of the policy initiatives that we did announce a couple of days ago, in fact, we gave the clue to it 2-3 years ago. So as the Honourable Prime Minister has said, and as we've said continuously as a government, that we do not actually plan a budget from year to year. We actually look at long-term goals.
What was the clue?
Lots of clues. For example, the civil service pay rise. We've been talking about civil service reform. We talked about it 2 years ago. And we talked about how we are going to actually take it step by step. We have to ensure that we have quality people. We have the open merit recruitment system. We will then compare the civil service salaries to the market, the rest of the market, do the comparative study, looked at the various positions available in government. Do they actually fit the modern day society or not, modern day service delivery or not? Then we do actually an assessment and do a re-evaluation of the remuneration exercise. This is just part of it.
Yes.
Following the remuneration exercise, of course, we set the base right. Then going forward, then you have performance-based systems. So you can have people who will be rewarded more than those who actually don't perform as well. So it's part of the process.
It's been continuing. So this is the comment by the opposition leader, Rotimum. They've been asking, the teachers and nurses have been asking for an increase all these years, and now on the eve of the next elections, they get it.
See, again,
it's wrong.
Well, it's part of the civil service reform. And see, the other thing is they have this very simplistic approach. And let me give you an example if you give me some time to explain that. And that is that, see, they think like one brush, wipes all or paints all. They think, oh, give us a 10% pay rise, a 15% pay rise. In fact, the unions are going, give us a 15% pay rise. When we did say to them, look, if we carry out a proper assessment, there would be a recognition of the specialist skill sets. So, for example, there are certain nurses now who have actually got a pay rise in excess of 70%.
Specialist nurses.
Specialist nurses, recognizing different skill sets. Midwives, people work in the sort of post-traumatic area. People deal with high sort of risk surgeries, as opposed to those who may not. So you see, they have a very simplistic approach. They don't actually put that intellectual input that's required, unfortunately. And the unions too. We had actually, when the Fiji Public Sector Trade Union, the Confederation, when we actually start talking to them about this, and I think they realize what we're doing, then they stopped coming to all their meetings. In fact, the past few meetings, they're actually on record, they stopped coming to them. Unfortunately for these people, they don't view economic policies, economic decisions in an apolitical perspective. We view these decisions as an apolitical perspective. In other words, we're not thinking about politics, about winning elections, etc. We actually focus on what is good for the country 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the track. Since 1987, no government has put in place a development plan. SVT government, the Garase government, none of them have put in place a development plan. We are the ones putting it in. It's going to be launched next month by the Honourable Prime Minister.
And all this
has taken some time because we have a focus on economic development, economic empowerment for individual Fijians, but doing it on a sustainable basis.
On a sustainable basis. So, for instance, this argument that civil servants are getting this average salary increase of 14.3%. Will that increase government's operating costs, as some are making out to be?
You see, again, this is a very, what I call the lack of intellectual input, intellectual honesty actually, because if somebody's going to talk about increasing the operating expenditure, they need to look at what's your total revenue. Now, revenue collection in Fiji compared to 2006 to compared to now, we've tripled the revenue. You've tripled revenue. So obviously it gives you bigger capacity to spend. What they also need to look at, what's the expenditure mix? Now, I've got some figures here. For example, in 1995, the then government, 88% of the money, percentage of the money they spent went on operating expenditure. Only 12% went on capital expenditure. You compare that to what we did
20 years ago.
That's 20 years ago. Look at 2006. 85% on operating expenditure, 15% on capital. You look at the Beni Marama government, you look at the Fiji First government, consistently increasing the amount of expenditure on operating being diminished, but the capital expenditure being increased. So if you look at the spend today, 2016, 2017, 40% went on capital, 60% went on operating. Even with this pay rise, the total operating expenditure we'll have is 59%, capital will be 41%.
So we have the capacity to pay for it, that's what
Exactly.
you're saying. We are not borrowing for this.
We are not borrowing to pay for any of our operating expenditure. In fact, we have a net savings from operating revenue as opposed to operating expenditure of $700 million. The net savings in 2006 was only $50 million. Today we're saving $700 million, so we're only borrowing to build. And guess what? When we borrow to build, we're actually borrowing to build for the future.
Okay, so the debts that we're taking, that we're going to discuss in detail much later, I will not
Sure.
get into that, but those are for capital projects?
Of course.
Or not for operating costs?
No, none at all.
Okay, so let's come back to this civil service increase. Those with an increase of over 15%, their jobs will be advertised. Is that correct, if I'm understanding that?
No.
Can you explain how that works?
There are certain positions where the band actually shifts. When people move
Right.
into higher bands, they actually then positions need to be advertised, right? There are obviously certain position bands, the jobs don't get advertised. We have generally the increments go through. Now, you see, the point that they're missing in all of this is that there are certain positions, for example, that are being recognized. So, for example, with the specialist nurses, all of these nurses are being treated in the same way. So, a nurse who may be actually doing, helping a doctor doing an angiogram, doing the stenting and what have you, when it gets done in Fiji, they get treated in the same bracket as a nurse who may be treating you in the outpatient when you go and puts a band-aid on your knee. Now, obviously, if you're going to have new categories,
So higher skills are getting higher
if
pay.
you're going to create new categories of position, recognizing the skill sets, obviously those positions need to be advertised. So these people will apply for them, and people who are already holding or doing those jobs will actually apply for those positions. It's very simple. You see, unfortunately, this is coming from the unions, who are now trying to, because they wanted to be the as they say in Fiji, the main boy about this whole thing, that we are the ones who brought this about.
Okay, the nurses,
for the first time you have a government
the nurses
that's taken a
example is a good
systemic
one.
approach to it.
The next example is good. What about in the normal civil service? Because this is an argument that's starting to come out now. They're giving a salary increase, but they're losing their job security. Is that correct?
That's not true at all. In fact, we have contracts that can go up to 5 years for civil servants. You go to the private sector.
So no one-year contracts?
No, we have 1 year contracts for those people who have an extension on the jobs after the age of 55. As you know, retirement age 55. So we have said if there are people with specialist skill sets that we don't have, there needs to be succession planning. We hold them, we give them 1 year contracts, because the whole idea is, you see, you forget, 69.4% of our entire population is below the age of 40. There's a young group of people who need jobs, and they need to be given a job security on the basis of open merit recruitment system. They need to know when they apply for jobs, they'll be treated equally. It doesn't matter whether they come from Savu-Savu, whether they come from Kandavu, or what ethnic group you belong to, what church group you belong to. Everybody needs to get treated equally, and it's on a transparent basis. But so those people who are over the age of 55, we require the skill sets to continue, they extend for only 1 year. Everybody else can get a 3 year contract, a 4 year contract, a 5 year contract.
All right.
You get that in the private sector too, Stanley. They only give you 3 year contract in the private sector.
We'll hold that for now, explaining the budget that he delivered on Thursday. And stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the show. You're watching For the Record. Now, FLP leader Mahendra Chaudhry said this was an election budget, like the rest of the the rest of the opposition parties, saying you're throwing a lot of money around to impress voters, you're increasing allowances for the poor, looking after the people with disabilities, increasing the tax threshold, all these lovely things. But your budget is silent on any real long-term measures to tackle the root causes of poverty, which he says is increasing employment for the youths and bringing down the cost of living. What's your response to this effort of increasing employment?
In fact, Stanley, I'm really surprised you're actually bringing this up as an issue. What you've just put to me is quite paradoxical. On one hand, they're saying we're throwing all this money around,
Right.
and we're giving it to the poor, we're giving it to the youth, but on the other hand, they're saying we're not creating employment for the youth.
So how does this budget create employment? What are the incentives that...
There are many incentives.
Right.
No, there are many incentives. So, for example, we are getting a younger population that's going to be more and more educated. So we're increasing the opportunities for employment. the economy is growing. When the economy grows, in other words, more jobs are being created.
Right.
Most definitely, most jobs are created. You go
Can
to
I
the
just cut in there? You say you're getting more people educated to find jobs, but that's been the issue in the past, where people come out and they can't find jobs in this country.
Well, the other thing is this, of course. Those people who say they used to come out of schools did not get jobs. Now, obviously, there's a couple of things that were affected it then. A lot of them weren't as qualified as they should have been, because a lot of them came out of high schools. Today, we have more students in universities than ever before. Something like 15 to 16,000 students are being assisted through the TELS programs, the scholarship programs, all of these sort of mechanisms to help them graduate better, get better qualifications. Economy is growing. When the economy expands, you have more factories, you have more offices being opened, etc., so more jobs are being created. And that's a known fact. You look at the Reserve Bank of Fiji statistics that talks about the number of percentage of growth in job advertisements. So that's obviously happening too. On the other hand, of course, we are assisting various other sectors directly. So if you listen to the budget, in the budget we talked about the manufacturing sector being built. We're building this hub in Warrambitia between Lautoka City and Nandi. We of course have other programs in place too. For example, some of the new initiatives, which is the YES initiative, the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, where we're actually setting aside money. There are a lot of young people who may have good ideas coming out of university, may need a little bit of oomph. They'll actually be assisted too. We have small to medium enterprise assistance that we are carrying out. The Honorable Prime Minister, for example, has been going out and giving the $1,000 grants. A lot of people actually get employed through that process. In fact, are able to pursue a specific career path in respect of that. At the same time also, we have a Reserve Bank initiative where we actually help small to medium enterprises to actually guarantee their loans when they go to mainstream financial institutions. The reality is that a lot of opportunities are being created. You see different sectors. The ITC sector is growing. We have now more mobile phones, smartphones, about 500,000 smartphones, more SIM cards in operation. What does that mean? It means that we have a population in Fiji very technologically savvy, offered various incentives in that area. Okay. And we're seeing a growth of, for example, call centers. Most young people take up those positions. Now, on the other hand, you say we're not helping the poor people. The poverty benefit scheme has been increased, the benefits under that. Disabled benefits have been increased. People who look after their abandoned relatives, child, has been assisted. Rural pregnant women, the food voucher programs have been assisted. All of these go directly to low-income people in respect of assisting them. But, on the other hand, of course, is that you need to look at it, what are we doing in infrastructure? Homes that never had electricity before, homes that did not have water before are getting that. Right. I'll give you a very quick example because we need to tackle it on the head. So the guy who lives in a village and he catches fish, he sells it by the roadside. He does not have electricity. When he sells the fish by the roadside, if all the fish does not get sold for the day, what does he do with the fish? The fish will go bad. He's got no electricity, therefore no freezer, no cooler. He either has to eat it, or he sells it at half the price, or 1/10 of the price, or it goes bad. If he has a refrigeration, because he now got electricity, he can cool the fish. Next day puts it by the roadside, puts water on it, fresh fish for sale. His income level goes up. These are the things that you need to think about. So many of the analysis that you see, for example, predominantly in the Fiji Times, this is why we've continuously said, please, you want to get the accurate picture, do not necessarily read the Fiji Times, because if you see it's a very skewed analysis. I can point out to you, for example, in the papers done by, they had an article on debt. They said the actual budget deficit is 499 million. However, the debt rises to 706.8 million when you add the government's debt repayments for the year amounting to 217 million. So in other words, why are they double adding? You see, they're adding the repayments to the actual deficit figure, which you don't. Everybody knows that. See, this is kind of skewed analysis that they're giving. They are not looking at various other issues. Look at
so you're not adding the interest. Is that what they're talking about?
That's part of the total expenditure that we have for the year. Now, if you look at Premila Kumar's comments, both in the Fiji Sun and the Fiji Times, she has said it's a good budget. It actually targets low-income families. For example, the subsidy for electricity, we pay for the 34 cents unit cost for electricity. We pay 17 cents for low-income families. Now, before the scheme was that if a family earned less than $30,000 a year, we paid for the 95 kilowatts, we subsidized that if they use it. But if they went slightly over 95, even if they went over to 96, we did not pay a single cent at all because you went over 95. The new adjustments we've made now, because we've been studying this for the past couple of years, submissions have also been made, we've spoken to FEA. Now, for low-income families, 30,000 or less, up to 100 kilowatts, we actually pay for it. Even if you may use 120, we still subsidize up to 100 kilowatts. So suddenly you have a whole group of people who get that, that assistance, that safety net.
Right, that's a great explanation. Understand? You've been doing the budgets for quite a while now, for almost 10 years. You raised the issue about the debt, so let's go to that.
Sure.
The issues of, we've had this discussion and debate about the national debt for a while. It was a big issue in the 2014 elections. We seem to be going around in circles on this one. The opposition has raised concerns about it, but these rising debt levels, while you continue to maintain that it is sustainable and manageable and necessary to invest now in public assets such as roads and bridges. How can you convince the public that we will be able to manage these debt levels responsibly?
Okay. You see, the way that you manage, see, we're a developing country. Fiji has only about 2 times in its history ever not had a deficit. So by its very definition, when you have a deficit, your debt level will rise. Right from the Ratumara government days, from the Alliance government days, we've always had a deficit. So if year in, year out you have a deficit, the figure of the debt will go up. The other measure is, though, as a percentage of your GDP. Is it increasing or decreasing? That's more of a better measure than the nominal figure of your debt.
Right.
So what that means is, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. This is what we've been talking about in the consultations. You earn $100, you go out and borrow $10. So you say debt to GDP ratio for you is, for example, is 10%, right? 10 over 100 is 10%. Now you earn suddenly $500, and then you go and borrow $50.
So you can borrow more.
So you can borrow $50, and debt to GDP ratio is 10%. But you borrowed more, but the same percentage is the percentage still the same. So you have bigger space to do that. Now the issue is about sustainability of that. Now when you are actually using your debt to actually fund, to build projects for the future, then obviously you are investing in the future, which means that the productivity capacity of your country increases. We build a road to Nambuwalu, Tahsil the road, right? That's a debt incurred.
Yeah.
That means the people from Nambuwalu can travel a lot better. The cost of the motor vehicle breakdown, the cost of taking the goods to the market
your
increase.
example on electricity and the refrigerator.
Productivity capacity is increased.
So for someone who's sitting at home who says, very short answer, 30 seconds before you go to the break. For someone who's sitting at home who says, I like the investment in these roads and this electricity, but I'm worried about my children being left with a big debt. Quick answer, what is your response to that?
Your debt to GDP ratio is decreasing. It's 47%. So in other words, your debt levels compared to how much productive capacity you have, actually is decreasing.
So we're living within our means.
Of course, that's the main point. You've hit the nail on the head. We live within our means, and we're living within our means, and that's what we aim to do. And by doing, the reason why we're able to do that, because we're tightening up those people who should be paying tax. There are a lot of black market economy that's going, black economy. We're tightening up on that. One supermarket had to pay a fine of $53 million. So we're going behind the scenes, for example.
So that's essentially where a lot of people are not seeing the revenue they think that would be not there. It's actually there. You're just getting it much better.
I think there are 2 categories of people in Fiji. I think the ordinary Fijians actually understand what we're doing. They have a lot better analysis and a lot better appreciation of what is happening, because they are the ones seeing the runs on the board, on the ground itself. The other category of people are these politicians who want to skew it essentially, just to get some cheap political points.
Cheap political points, as some have said, is it more politics and economics, or is it economics dominating the show? We are all watching For the Record. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the show. We're with the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum, discussing the 2017-2018 national budget. Now let's talk about infrastructure, one of the biggest allocations last year and this year. 527 million, if I'm correct. So we would be spending over $1 billion in these 2 years on infrastructure. What's the total amount and time frame we are looking to bring out the infrastructure projects that to bring up to standard? How much longer will we be spending this massively on infrastructure? Because we are borrowing for this, aren't we?
See, Stanley, I think when you quote those figures, it's actually incorrect, because you need to also look at, when you talk about infrastructure, you need to also talk about electricity. you're talking about roads only. You need to talk about electricity. You need to talk about water. Water Authority of Fiji, in this coming budget, has been allocated about $300 million more. Huge demand for people to have access to water.
So you're saying it's actually more on infrastructure that we are spending.
If you combine electricity, if you combine water, if you combine roads, and it is actually investment. You'd be surprised there's still many people in Fiji who for decades, for 50, 100 years now, have been drinking from wells. There are some people whose wells are drying up. Of course, issues like climate change does affect them. So we need to get them connected to water systems. We need to have standalone water systems. We need to actually provide people water tanks. If you see the package that we're going to put out, actually in Parliament, gives you a detailed breakdown of exactly where these water tanks are going, exactly where the standalone systems will be going, exactly who will get connected to the reticulated water systems.
Right. But these are some of the things that you've been doing in previous budget, haven't you?
Yes, and of course there's a growing demand because, unfortunately, because of the neglect of previous governments, these things have not been addressed for decades in Fiji.
I mean, but you attack previous governments, but you've been in government for quite some time now. So
yes, it's a 100-year-old problem. Of course, you're not going to solve it within 10 years. I mean, also you have aging assets. You have assets that were put in 50 years ago. You have
because this is what the opposition is saying. He's just blaming previous governments all the time, but you've been in power for quite some time now, so why haven't the issues been fixed?
Stanley, I'm sure you have a bit more sort of ability to understand this than the opposition. Just because you have
Don't give me too much credit.
No, but I'm sure. But I mean, no. The fact of the matter is that even if you go to a country like Australia and New Zealand, it takes them decades and decades to actually address these issues. You also got to have a capacity locally to be able to put that in. I mean, you have water pipes that needs to be put in, water pipes need to be replaced. It takes a long time. And of course, there's a lot of money that goes into that because of the fact water pipes aren't cheap. You also, for example, when you build roads, as you know, the tradition in Fiji has been, when you build a road, you put a water pipe underneath the road. When the water pipe leaks, you dig up the road to fix the water pipe, but then you don't fix up the road. So if you look at the four-laning of the road that's taking place between Nandi Airport and Namaka Matintar, all the utilities are being put on the side of the road. So next time there's some problem or telecom wants to come and dig up a cable or FEA, whatever, they don't actually dig up the road. That's very bad usage of money.
So we're spending on investing and maintaining at the same time.
We're actually rehabilitating. We're actually building new projects. We're actually maintaining, and we're also replacing infrastructure that needs to be replaced. And of course, there are new roads being built. We have a growing need in respect of roads, for example, growing need in sewage systems. A very low rate of sewage connectivity in Fiji overall. We need the sewage system connected. Most people in Suva, for example, have septic tanks. Right. Now, let me give you an example to unlock the economic potential. When you have septic tanks, you cannot have the ability to build sort of more than 3 flats. If you have connectivity to the sewage system, you can build 5 apartments, right. 6 apartments, 7 apartments, which means more housing available.
How much longer will we be spending this much amount of money on infrastructure?
Well,
and we will be having to borrow more for this.
You see, the point is this. Again, you're taking a very kind of one-dimensional perspective of these things. What you should be asking is, how much more investment will we make? Investment are we making in our infrastructure to increase our productive capacity?
I think both questions can be asked.
No. Well, I'm answering you from the positive perspective because you are suddenly sounding like a mouthpiece of the opposition.
No, I'm asking the questions that people are asking.
No. Yeah. Well, I think it depends on which people. I think if you go to the rural areas where people are getting connected, they believe it's a positive thing. They believe it's a good thing. If you go to rural areas, people who are connected to the FEA grid, before they have to pay a 10% connection fee, they no longer have to do that. We are doing it for them. We need to look at things from a productive capacity perspective. If we are able to make these investments now, so the guy who can now set up a poultry farm because he's now got access to electricity and water, what does that mean? It means the cost of chickens, firstly, he'll get a source of livelihood. Secondly, we'll get better pricing in terms of our chickens. So these are the access issues that we need to be able to maintain. You will reach a stage, of course, once you're investing here, your productivity capacity will go up. More people will be able to access income generating sources. Right. That's how you got to view it.
Let's talk about the minimum wage. We've got quite a bit to go through. There's a lot of issues. Sure. Not your words, but plenty have described your decision on the minimum wage as a cautious approach. And the question is, this government has been known for bold, socially inclusive policies. If it was a cautious approach, why were you not so bold in raising the minimum wage across the board?
You see, firstly, you have to understand, minimum wage is for unskilled workers.
Yeah.
There are other 10 sectorial wages, what we call councils. Their rates have also gone up. People are not talking about that. Their rates have also gone up. So people who have a minimum, say, wage in their sector that may be $4 an hour, their rates have also increased. There are people also at the same time who minimum wage maybe say $5 or $4, but they're being paid $8 or $9 or $12 because of the lack of people qualified in that particular area. So don't think, and most people think when you say minimum wage, it's for everybody across the board.
No, it's
only for
unskilled
unskilled workers, right?
Now,
So no, hang on, let me finish. Now, the Honourable Minister for Employment then, he got an independent consultant, and the consultant then went around Fiji and had public consultations, met with the trade unions, met with the employers, met with the general public, and factored in, for example, the determinants that actually affect your day-to-day living. When you actually live, you pay for water, you pay for electricity, you pay for education, you pay for bus fares for your school kids. All of these things combined, then you need to look at how much money do you need to have to be able to then have a reasonable income or reasonable life. All of that needs to be factored in. Following all those consultations, then the consultants come up with a rate of $2.68. Now, on the other hand, you also have to look at what will be the impact of such a rise.
Right.
Now, because
we have to go to the break soon,
okay.
but my question, just before we go to the break, when do you foresee, given people have made this such a big issue, will there ever be an increase in the minimum wage across the board?
But that's a silly question, with respect.
Yeah.
When you say across the board, what do you mean across the board? You mean there are people at the
mean,
moment, the minimum wage getting $5. You want them to get $2.68?
Well, across the board for the minimum wage for people who've been living below the poverty line that the opposition has been stating all this
No,
time.
but again, you're accepting supposedly things as facts when they are not facts. The reality
Your
is
response?
this. The reality is this. The $2.68 is a wage that actually has been considered through public consultations. You forget that there are people in Fiji, for example, who work for themselves.
Right.
130,000 Fijians actually work for themselves.
Selling
People
coconut
sell
on the
coconuts,
roadside.
vegetables, whatever it is. I may have a small garage. I'm working for myself. That's my own business. Minimum wage is not going to affect me. Minimum wage is not going to affect the person who's selling coconuts, but it will only affect them in a negative sense if, for example, everybody else in the minimum wage goes up to $4 or $5 an hour, because you can bet the employer of that particular employee will pass on the cost to the person who sells coconut and goes to the shop to buy it. Their component of their income has not increased, but those people from whom he acquires the services or she acquires the services from has increased. These people don't think about it because they are playing trade union politics. That's what they're doing.
Okay. Trade union politics, 2017-2018 national budget. You're watching For the Record. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to For the Record. Now, Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Mr. Ayaz Said Kayum, one of the most widely praised aspects of the budget was the increase in the education sector, big increase, 223 million from last year. In fact, you've been consistently investing in a lot of money in education, free bus fare, tuition-free education. What's the impact or the results that you've seen from this investment?
There's obviously the attendance of students, for example, from year 1 to year 13 has increased substantially. Parents who before hesitated to send their children are sending them to school because they no longer have to pay for school fees. And again, as I said earlier on, we have now more students in tertiary institutions, including technical colleges, than ever before. So in other words, we are having better trained people and more of a knowledge-based society. So that's what the results are, and it means the increased economic opportunities for them.
So better access, easier access for a lot of people. What about the quality of education?
Well, we believe
because that's been raised, you've seen.
Yes, absolutely.
Issues,
I mean, again, many of these issues are legacy issues. We've been constantly working on that. The Honourable Minister for Education has been working on that. We, for example, also segregated, schools before used to have the mainstream courses, then you had the vocational. Now we set up individual technical courses, so that helps the focus on the two aspects of education. And of course, they've been revamping some of the curriculum in respect of being responsive to modern day sort of teaching methods and new ideas. On the other hand, of course, we're now investing more in the early childhood education. In other words, you build capacity at that younger level, because literacy rates in some of the schools and the students were very low previously. So those are the kind of investments that we're making. Of course, it needs to be increased. We need to have better quality education. There's always room. Every country, even in fact recently there's a study in Australia where they were commenting that the literacy rates was in fact decreasing. Numeracy rates actually was decreasing. So every country has these challenges, and we need to obviously deal with that. In Fiji's case, obviously, we have to deal with a lot more given the legacy issues, but it's been worked upon. But the other point, of course, Stanley, part of that is the student-teacher ratio, or teacher-student ratio. As you can see, consecutively in the past 3-4 years, every year we've been allocating new sums of money for new
because this remains an issue.
New teacher students. So in this year's budget, for example, we've got 250 new positions. We have got 200 new primary school teacher positions and 50 new high school student teacher positions. So there's been constantly been increased. And of course, in respect of what we are doing in the tertiary education system, it's been significantly quite a huge step. Some of the new initiatives in the new coming years, of course, there are certain courses, for example, at FNU, engineering courses, they don't actually require you to do year 13 for you to qualify to do those courses. Okay. They take people in from year 12. So we've now, previously it was not allowed, we allow them to do that.
So increasing the opportunities, eh?
Absolutely, because we also need a lot of engineers.
That's right. Let's move on to health. You've increased the health budget by 77 million. I'd like to know what you're doing that's different from the past, because we've seen this government and previous governments put a lot of money towards health, yet we still see over the last few months even complaints about lack of beds at maternity wards, overcrowded hospitals, not enough doctors and nurses, long waits at health centers. What will be different about this year's budget to address this, or will be more, just putting more money into it?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that we're increasing the number of nurses intake, we're also increasing the number of doctors intake. As it was announced in the budget, we've got now monies allocated for specialist positions to actually recruit people. Yes, I mean, the ideal situation is to get more Fijian doctors, but we cannot turn specialists overnight. Again, these are legacy issues. You know, for example, you don't become a heart surgeon overnight. You need 10, 15 years of training before you can cut you open and play around with your heart. The fact of the matter is that we're investing that. In the meantime, we need to be able to bring in more specialists. So that, again, brings more specialist attention at the more subdivisional levels. So that's very, very important to do that, not just everybody have to come to Suva. And the other is, of course, investment in the equipment, and that's very substantial. Part of the new initiative we announced was that we're setting up a 10 machine dialysis center up at, in Tamavua. It will become a dialysis center, not just dialysis center, but kidney center. We've got the only Fijian nephrologist, doctor who's the only nephrologist in Fiji, who will be heading up the division. The Minister of Health has also announced that we're setting up a 3-4 new dialysis center machine in Lautoka. A lot of new changes in that respect, but also, as you know, we've set up a new call line, the 151 number, so people can lodge complaints, lodge their complaints, etc. And again, the whole culture, again, it goes back to civil service reform. In the part of the reform,
one of the issues was the lack of responsiveness.
Absolutely. Part of the reform also is that you need to be professional about how you deal with the ordinary members of citizens. So, and as we keep on saying to the civil servants, the ordinary Fijian is your customer. They are your client, they are your customer. Treat them with respect as provided for in the Constitution. Be professional. You cannot tolerate civil servants who are not going to do that. So that's part of the civil service reform also. So the new equipment, new technology, number of doctors being increased, number of nurses being increased, and of course at the same time to be able to provide a lot more better services in the decentralized areas. The other announcement, of course, we made is that we're looking at Lautoka Hospital being a PPP with an international hospital together with FNPF. So once you do that, and again I'm giving you a clue as to what we're going to do in the next few years' time. Once we are able to then do this, and anybody thinking about this would know this, that's where we headed towards. Once you're able to provide a better range of tertiary quality education, health services in Fiji, you can then get into a national health scheme.
Okay. All right. So we'll see how that works a year from now when I interview you again. On housing, this is something that
I'm glad you think that we'll be interviewing each other in 1 year's time.
Well, you'll be announcing the 2018 national budget, I know that for sure. We'll see what happens after that. Now housing, let's go to sugar. We've poured millions, possibly billions, to save the industry over the years, and rightfully so. It's earned billions for the country and plays an important role in the economy. But every budget we see people come, the governments, including this government, come with funds and come with solutions to revive the industries. Are these plans for the sugar industry really working?
See, Stanley, if you, the last session in Parliament, apart from the budget, we actually guaranteed a loan for FSC to the tune of $202 million for them to be able to revamp the sugar industry.
I saw loans in 2007, 2008.
But not in a. Yes, I mean, of course.
What's new?
The reality is that those loans, of course, many of them were to pay mainly for sort of some upgrades.
It was for upgrades.
Some upgrades, well, you can go back to the SDL government. They did this, upgrade with the Indian companies. Did not work out very successfully. In fact, many of the legacy issues from that, we're actually paying for it now, in respect of it was not done properly. But I mean, I don't want to go into that. So you need to focus on the future too, also, rather than talking about just 2007. Let's talk about the future. The fact is that we have a good plan. We have a good CEO. We have a good CEO. We have a good board. We have a structured plan. There's in respect of, for example, fixing up the rail system. Do you know that the rail system, the cost of carting cane by rail is significantly much lower than cost of carting cane by trucks? In one stage in Fiji, 60% of all the cane used to go by rail. Today, only 20%. So obviously, there's been no investment in that. We're going to do that. That's part and parcel of $200 million loan, also the milk upgrades.
Right.
What we have done, as we discussed very quickly, I know you want to talk about other things, is that in the sugarcane industry, a lot of these people have come along, what I call the overnight sort of saviors, who say, we'll give you $100 a ton. That's ridiculous. The fact of the matter is that what's the point of giving $100 in the same way they say, oh, we'll exempt more items for VAT, if your cost input is going to continue to rise.
Right.
And this is the purpose, if you look at the rationale behind this budget. So we have in fact increased the subsidy for fertilizer. So the farmer, instead of paying before, the full price of fertilizer over $40. We subsidized it. They have to pay about $32, $31. Now after this budget announcement, they'll pay only $20 a bag, 50 kilogram bag. Also, for the first time, we've introduced weed-aside subsidy.
A lot of support there for the farmers and the growers.
But the important point is this. It's the cost input. And we have said that this will stay for 3 years. It's not some overnight thing. It's for 3 years because the FSC $202 million loan drawdown is over upgrading for the 3 years. So everybody's certainty. In the same way, Honorable Bhiman Prasad has got it wrong. In the Fiji Times, he's saying, I had said last year that the taxes on alcohol and cigarettes won't increase for next 3 years. No. What we had said was that the rate of increase will remain the same for the next 3 years to give certainty to people.
Okay.
So that's what we've done with sugarcane.
Well, it's a political issue, and you will not be agreeing with everything you're saying here today.
No, I'm giving you facts. I'm giving you facts. It's facts. Nothing to disagree, agree about. It's facts. It's like saying you're sitting in front of me. That's a fact.
Okay.
No, but the fact is also FSC is bringing in now 300 new trucks themselves to provide carting. Because FSC's objective is not to make money on carting per se, but to get the sugarcane to the mills. In the same way, we've involved the Commerce Commission with the cane harvesters. A lot of these people who own these cane harvesters, they were charging ridiculous rates per ton. What's the point of getting mechanized equipment if the cost is not going to come down? So Commerce Commission stepped in, viewing it from an anti-competitive behavior, monopolistic position, and they've set a minimum price, or the maximum price.
So short question before we go to the break. How long, what's the target, do you think, we will see the industry turn around?
We believe that with these initiatives that have been put in place, you give
all those initiatives that you've
put another crushing season, you see significant change. There's a lot of confidence. We've also, for example, made allocation for new farmers. A lot of confidence. There are a lot of positive people out there, unless, of course, you read the Fiji Times. A lot of positive, vibes we're getting from the farmers. Unfortunately, again, as the Honourable Prime Minister said, don't politicize the sugarcane industry. Every single politician now is suddenly becoming an expert on sugar, and every single politician now wants to use this poor farmers.
That is the sugar industry.
No, that is not the sugar industry. This is the thing. You have to question
that is the way the sugar industry has been debated over all this time.
No, but we should change it. We should change it. We used to drink from the well. Doesn't mean we're going to drink well from the rest of our lives.
How long do you think you can turn this around?
Of course, we said with these new initiatives, you'll see a lot of positive input. You give it another year or so.
Another year? So next year's budget.
Absolutely.
We'll look at this discussion.
Absolutely.
You're watching For the Record. We'll be back after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching For the Record. Now, Attorney General, Minister for Economy, you undertook an extensive process in putting together this budget. You undertook budget consultations all around the country in schools, and you spoke to a lot of young people. The opposition accused you of campaigning and targeting them as a voting bloc. But you did respond and delivered on some of the issues that I saw at those consultations that were raised by young people. There was a strong focus on the investment in youth, correct?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, look, as we've said right from the beginning, I mean, let's just put aside what the opposition says. I mean, they always make sort of, cheap politics. But anyway, our focus is, we continuously say, for any country to be successful, you have to look to the future. You have to look to the future. And 69.4% of today's population in Fiji is below the age of 40. These people have got the intellect, they have the brain power, they are the future leaders. In very few years' time, one of them will be sitting here, you'll be interviewing them. That's the reality.
You've put a lot of confidence in them in this budget.
Absolutely.
You've given them a lot of allowances, you've raised their allowances, even making them manage their allowances, which some people are worried about, that they'll spend it all on, something else. So what gives you confidence in our young people? What makes you trust them?
We've always said from the beginning we have a lot of confidence in them. Because these people actually, when you go and talk to them one-on-one, when you go to these consultations, you'll actually find that these people are quite inspirational. They've got a lot of good ideas, a lot of idealism, very pragmatic also. But also a lot of them are very, very patriotic about their country. They want to stay here. They want to get access to the qualifications. They want to have the right services, and they will contribute enormously to our country. That's where our future lies. We have to think about it. As leaders, that's what we need to focus on. So for example, things like, very simple things like, before we had this sort of cumbersome process of getting guarantors if you could take out TELs. Of course, it was a new program. We had to be very cautious about it. And then looking at it for the past couple of years, we've now released that. We've said no more guarantors. Yes, you do need a guarantor if you leave Fiji. We've had about 4 or 5 students who've got their qualifications, they've left Fiji, they migrated. They have not paid their debts.
They ran away.
They run away. So there's 4 or 5 out of the many thousands that actually have received the benefit. So, but the fact of the matter is we're saying no more guarantors. You work in Fiji, you live in Fiji, etc. If you go overseas, if you still have a debt, you just need to provide a surety.
So basically you're giving our young people a go.
And FERCA will obviously collect it once they start working. We are giving them a go. We have also, for example, Stanley, as you may have seen, that we announced this program where those students who complete a degree at a university through TELS, if they come from a low-income family, if they earn less than $30,000 a year, the family, we will give them a $300 startup. It's a very practical issue. Because you may be somebody in Lambasa, you may be coming for a job in Suva. You may not have a suit. You may need to pay for your boat fare. These are the sort of one of the things that we're helping them to be able to provide them assistance. As I said with the
So how do you guarantee that it will be spent on what it's supposed to be used for?
Look, in the same way is this. When you trust people, and we've obviously set a particular criteria, if you're below 30,000, you have to register with National Employment Center. You may not necessarily always get a 100% strike rate. But if you have a good strike rate, it's 80%, 85%. It's not bad investment. In the same way, for example, when some businesses, even when they start on their own, not all of them are successful, but majority of them are. So we have to have that level of confidence. And the moment you start respecting people, giving them confidence, you'll find very quickly they'll give you that same level of respect and confidence back.
All right. Let's move on to finish off the show. You've had almost 8 years in a row now. Or is it already 8 years in a row of economic growth?
Yes.
Economic growth, which is a great achievement by any measure. Economies usually typically enjoy periods of growth and at times recession due to external shocks and issues. What are you looking out for? What are you guarding against to ensure that we don't fall into economic decline? So what are things that keep you awake at night as you handle the economy?
Climate change, in fact cyclones. I mean, we had Cyclone Winston. It wiped off about $1.4 billion worth of our GDP. Thankfully, thank God that the economic growth, it decreased from the projected growth, but it did not go into negative. So we still grew by over 2%. So the whole idea, again, this goes back to infrastructure, building resilience. I will give you a simple example. The 4-lane road has been done by along Nandi Airport. If you go there now, you won't see any overhead cables. It's all been put underground. Costs slightly more money, but next time a cyclone comes, there's no cables, wires to be blown down.
Yeah.
So this is what you call building resilience. So of course that is very important to ensure that if we get another cyclone next year. This is why again in the budget we worked with the Insurance Council. We're going to provide premiums for low-income people to get some minimum insurance cover on their homes. Do external tie-downs even if they get a $5,000 payout. We're working on that. We're working on crop insurance. So these are some of the things what we call acts of God that may be out of our control, but they are some of the things. And if you read the latest report by Moody's that gave a very resounding record card for us, they said one of the threats to countries like ours is climatic changes.
Our time's up. Just very quickly, in 30 seconds, what's the next steps in this budget process? I understand you're going to go on a road show, so what's next? What can the public
of course. I mean, through shows like yours, of course, this is part of the roadshow. We're coming and talking to you, explain to Fijian people about what the budget is all about. We'll also be going out to talk to members of the public who want to get more information about the budget. There's a lot of initiatives that's there. In your show, we cannot cover everything, so when we have,
Sure.
sort of town hall type meetings to tell them about the budget, and that is very, very important to tell them about it, because people need to know and be empowered by the many initiatives we put in place.
Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Stanley.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
That was the show for the evening. Please join us again next week at the same time. But up next is Nemani Ndelembatiki with my say good night.
Good evening. I'm Nemani Ndelembatiki of the Fiji Sun. Welcome to Fiji's first TV editorial show. In my say tonight, I will speak on the continuing debate over Itoke rights and land. Politicians who are peddling lies and half-truths for cheap political gains are doing a great disservice to the people of this country. Not long ago, I went to this village where I heard an extraordinary story. There was some discussion on the extension of village boundaries. Some villagers had this apprehension that foreigners or other races would come in shortly and occupy the area in the extension. I asked them where they got their information from. One person said a politician who had gone through the area said it. I told them that they should verify all information to ascertain the truth. Sadly, there is a lot of misinformation happening out there about Itoke land and Itoke rights. That is likely to intensify when the 2018 general election draws near. The usual suspects who started unfounded rumors that Itoke were losing their land, their rights and heritage appear to be back in the hustings as they return to the campaign trail. As a tip, Itoke villagers can verify information that bothers them, from the Turani Koro or the village headman, the Matani Tikina or the district rep, the Rokotui and the provincial office. If they are still not satisfied with the response, they can check with the Ministry of Itoke Affairs and the Itoke Land Trust Board if it's to do with Matangali land. If Itoke issues from their land, culture, to ownership rights and their resources have always been contentious topics of intense debate. A lot of energy is expended and time spent talking about issues that are of little consequences to the positive development of the Itoke people and the country as a whole. Other races can no longer be used as scapegoats for the Itoke lagging behind in education, business and commerce. The finger points to those who were in leadership over the last 5 decades. The Itoke own 91% of the total land mass in Fiji, but that is not reflected in the economic development, in the economic involvement. It is often said that the Itoke are asset rich, but cash poor. But what have we done about it? Some attempts in the past to help the Itoke to get into business and commerce failed, like the setting up of the Native Land Development Corporation, or the NLDC, and a supermarket chain venture. Now there is a much clearer path on how we can utilize the Itoke land. This past week in the West, 4 Itoke land-owning units held groundbreaking ceremonies for development projects that have been made possible by a government assistance under a 10 million development fund for landowners. This is the first ever government-funded development projects on Itoke land. The Itoke landowners have been given financial empowerment to undertake those commercial projects. It follows the same principle as the small business grants. Thousands who otherwise would not have had the opportunity to engage in small businesses are now active participants in the economy. This is what we should be talking about, getting Fijians or Itoke in this matter engaged in economic development, not wasting our time talking about things that are not true. The fact is, Itoke land and rights are intact and protected by the Constitution. Since the introduction of the Constitution no Itoke land has been lost as claimed by some. The Itoke rights are intact, and all things that Itoke hold dear are safe. They are still in control. There has been some criticism that government controls the administration of Itoke land through a board. The board ensures that the landowners get the best returns for their land. But the real control rests with the landowners. No land can be leased for development unless it is approved by the landowners. It includes the terms of leases as well. The landowners also have the power to go to the land bank and offer their land for development lease. If the landowners refuse to sign any proposal, the status quo remains the same. So the landowners are still in the driver's seat. Despite this assurance, some politicians put on their own spin on the issues selfishly to score cheap political points. But people need to know that not all the things some of these politicians say are true. I am Nemani Ndelembetiki of the Fiji Sun, and that was my say tonight. For more of my views, you can read the Fiji Sun. See you next week.